This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, nonstop Leafs talk starts now.
What is good in the hood, my friends? It appears the Leafs are ready to name the 18th GM in franchise history, presented by Betano. It's the Wednesday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga and former NHL netminder Carter Hutton with you. Jay Rosehill will be back tomorrow, but Huts, lots to talk about on this Wednesday. How are you, buddy?
Good. They didn't wait till the weekend for us. They did it midweek, and it's obviously a exciting time. We kind of thought something was going to drop here soon, and we can't be surprised. We heard a lot about it, but a little bit of excitement and maybe overwhelmed and underwhelmed by the decision.
Yeah, we'll get into it for sure. I'll tell you, I do have a bone to pick because coming up this weekend, I'll be headed to Montreal for a wedding. And I was telling my old man on Sunday, I'm like, just wait. They're going to announce something on Friday. And this is trending towards an introductory press conference on Friday. So everything's spoiled. And I don't know how the fuck I'm going to get to Montreal. But that's beside the point, because our mission statement here at Leafs Morning Take was to bring you the news when it comes. And if it comes on Friday, it comes on Friday. But nonetheless, the reports are out. They've been out since Tuesday. So we'll dive into things. I should mention as well, great guest for today's show as well. Co-host from Barn Burner over in Calgary with Mulberg and obviously Rhett Warner as well. Good old boomer down there. Ryan Pinder will drop by in about 10 minutes from now. We'll break things down, get the 411 on Brad Treliving, expected to become the 18th GM in Toronto Maple Leafs franchise history. Remember to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Again, at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. If you're watching right now and are not subscribed, please subscribe. We deliver the best content out there. I am very biased, but just believe me. Additionally, we're available wherever you find your podcast. Just search Leafs Morning Take, and we'll pop right up for you. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest in all things Toronto Maple Leafs. Also, the chat is on fire as I look right now. We have over 130 people viewing right now, so we better hit the ball out of the park when it comes to the conversation, your Huts. But thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, drop us a line in the chat down below here on YouTube, and we'll get to it a bit later on in the show. But for now, let's get over the boards. So as stated, a tweet comes out on Tuesday night from Darren Dreger from TSN, of course, saying all signs point to Brad Treliving being named as the new GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And earlier today, sort of doubling up, Frank Saravalli, our very own Frank Saravalli, saying everything just being put together in a new contract. And it seems very, 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 very likely that it's going to be Brad Treliving as the next GM. This sort of came out of nowhere, but am I stunned? Not really, Huts, because this is the first name that came to the forefront last week when all this started, right?
Yeah, it was the first name came out right away. And, we talked about that yesterday, like a lot of pressure to get something done here. Time is closing. We talk about Matthews' contract. We talk about the big four. And I believe this is going to be a different relationship he's going to have with this player, a guy who's not going to be afraid to split up that core, to make a big move. You can judge his past contracts. You can go over and overanalyze everything, but what's going to be done is done. He's going to be the guy. And, there's obviously going to be the debate, was Dubas better than him? Was this the wrong decision? Was this the right decision? But you could argue a lot of those contracts that Dubas gave out too. You look at the one he gave, we're staring down the barrel of that gun right now with the Matthews deal and that free agency coming, the Marner deal, the Tavares deal. So these are things that are going to be judged on what he can do moving forward. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out here for sure.
Honestly, I don't have as much of an issue as some people do. As you mentioned, the people who love Kyle Dubas already all over social media saying what a downgrade. I don't know how you can make that proclamation when the man has done nothing. He hasn't even signed his fucking contract yet. But a couple things I'll take. Experience in a Canadian market, that should not be understated. He was in Calgary for a long period of time. He answered to ownership. That's a big thing to answer as well. Experience, has lots of connections, and personally, Great with the media. Everybody I talked to in Calgary say they loved working alongside Brad Treliving. He was very convenient, very open, very good with them. I like that from a media perspective. I just think he checks a lot of boxes. I know some people point to his contracts and stuff like that, but find me a GM who hasn't signed good contracts and bad contracts, made good trades and bad trades. Not to say that Brad Treliving is vanilla, but he's sort of in between like Kyle Dubas and say like Brian Burke over the edge, like Mark Bergevin style. And I think he's got bite. He's not scared to make big time decisions. Not to say Kyle Dubas wasn't, but I think this is a good hire for this market, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot that comes with this market too, right? Outside of just the game of hockey, the contracts, the lifestyle, dealing with the media. Every day it's in your face. You're going to the grocery store. Like even Dubas talks about that, the pressure that it put on his family being in that Toronto market, where this is a guy that has the experience, he's got a lengthy resume, he knows how to manage it, and he's coming into this situation with confidence and experience. And granted, we can look at the trades he's made and dissect them, but time is going to tell. It's the same thing right now. We talk about the Chuck trade, getting Huberdeau.
Yeah.
These guys it's only 1 year into that deal, right? These are something that we've talked about. This could be a trade that they win down the road, right? There's always that longevity to a trade that, everybody wants the initial like knee-jerk reaction to what happens, but it takes time and there's a long plan. And I think he's set in place here in Toronto and he's prepared, I think, with the durability of what kind of GM he is in person to sustain it over time in this market.
At the very least, give the guy a shot. That's all I'm saying. 53 years of age, spent the last 9 years as the GM. Calgary made the playoffs 5 times, never made it past round 2. 5 different head coaches. That's the astounding thing as well, that the Flames, will be making a coaching change, and that's going to be the 6th time in 10 years when they announce who it's going to be, whether it's Mitch Love or somebody like that from the minor leagues, or they bring in somebody externally. I think it's the fascination as well. And ultimately, for me, it sort of streamlines the conversation. What does this mean for Sheldon Keefe? But when push comes to shove, I think I'm okay with the hiring. I was probably somewhere in between when it came to Kyle Dubas. I thought it was time for a change. I thought it was going to be the head coach, ends up being the GM. But I think people in general need to give Brad Treliving the benefit of the doubt. Until he proves this market wrong, I'm going to believe in the guy, man.
Yeah, that's all you can do, right? It's one of those things. We got to trust the powers that be. And,
Yeah.
it's, you look at the other side. If they take somebody that is off the market and off the grid that we don't know, that's more the analytics side of it, or an assistant GM, where does that lay? Like, you still have Prindham here. Like, does he stay? Is that still there?
Mm-hmm.
Is that still his partner? Is he gone now? So there's so many different dynamics in this market. But I do love the fact, like you spoke about, that he's immersed in the Canadian market. He understands what he's getting himself into, where he's not going to be overwhelmed by that fact, but it's going to be interesting, and I'm excited for it. I hope that this is the turn of the right page, and I guess, like we say, we can sit here and make our decisions, but time will tell.
Before we bring in Ryan Pinder here, I wanted to get your thoughts on the copycat league conversation, because obviously with Brad Treliving coming in, I wonder how often that conversation will be brought up about the Matthew Tkachuk trade. And I wonder if this is sort of like a redemption time, taking nothing away from that trade. As you just stated, I think there's a possibility it comes back the other way. And quite frankly, I think in the long run, it'll help both Calgary and it'll help obviously the Florida Panthers. But in your opinion, what does this mean for the Big Four? Is it more likely, less likely, the same that one of these guys out the door this summer?
I think it gives it a better chance, not saying that something's going to drop, but now you don't have this relationship that's built. Dubas, like we've talked about so many times, he loves his boys, right? Like, these are his guys that he wanted to win with. And the doubt in his final, message coming in, this is obviously going to be something that Treliving has to manage. And I think it's something where you can make a move. The Leafs aren't bad. We're in good shape. We're not far away. Just got to the second round. You look at Florida. Is there some trades where we could make, to beef up that back end, to find our, those playoff players? We look at like Sam Bennett and the way Tkachuk plays, these styles that translate a little better to the playoffs. Where does he find that piece, that can make this team push it over the top? And, and finding a goalie that's going to be their guy. Is it going to be Woll? Is it going to be Samsonov? There's so many different moving parts. And I think right now, looking at this league, knowing what Florida was, and what they were last year, they were so good, and this season they struggled, and now look at them. So I think you can find that in that. It's just finding that right element, that right mix that's going to push you over the top.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I would love to know behind the scenes what Brad Treliving said when pressed on the core four, what the right decision is, how he feels about them, would he like to make a big time move and blow it up? Yeah, he's got the experience, and people like to compare and contrast even the Johnny Gaudreau situation, the Matthew Tkachuk situation. But all in all, time will tell. And I think it's interesting too that Brad Treliving, I believe, to the best of my knowledge, he can't take part in the draft that's coming up in a couple weeks' time in Nashville. So keep that in the back of your minds as well. And again, the first order of business would be that conversation, that call with Austin Matthews, and only time will tell on that front as well. For now, I'm going to start a new segment. Let's swipe right with Pinder, not Tinder. Happy to bring in the coast of barn burner Ryan Pinder out in Calgary. I want to get the 411 on all things Brad Treliving. How are you, buddy?
I'm old now. I've got my twins are 7. I've never been on a dating app. I missed that window, but I think swipe right means we're good. That's right.
Yes.
We're going to Netflix
You're
and chill
approved.
things a while, right?
Yeah, I'd probably super like you, to be honest. You probably won't know that terminology. Okay, the first swipe I want to converse about. Is it Treliving or tree living, dude? I need that answer.
Well, I mean, I just he's known as Tree, so I always say Treliving, but I know there's 2 other ways people have said it. I would just what does the old man say on the reality TV show? I feel like if I could start fresh, that's what I'd do. I'd go to Dragon's Den and listen to the old man, because there's no way some guy worth millions and millions is going to say his own name wrong, right? Like that's got to be the way to do it if you start fresh.
I don't know if you watched the NHL, say the last 25 years. I think it was the Mahalik brothers, Mahalik. They had no fucking clue what they were calling themselves at the end of the day.
Tony Lidman,
all right, dude, what's the scuttlebutt?
There's a lot of guys. Yeah, it's
exactly.
Make your mind. Exactly. You're an adult. Don't change it on us, okay? Yeah.
Jakob your last name's Pinder. We just have no clue. What can you tell us about Brad Treliving first and foremost?
Well, incredibly hard worker and a guy that has held the post for 9 years here, almost exactly to that 9-year mark, and a guy that isn't afraid of swinging a big deal. I wrote down some of the significant transactions over his time here. Very early on, 2015, he sends a first and 2 seconds for Dougie Hamilton at the draft. This is a theme. There's big deals around the draft. 2 years later, it's a first and 2 seconds for Travis Hamonic. They thought they were Travis Hamonic away. Then at the draft a few years later, it's Fox Hamilton, who was acquired 3 years prior, as well as Michael Furlan to Carolina for Hanifin and Lindholm. Huge blockbuster deal, only to be outdone by his blockbuster last summer after Johnny Gaudreau walks. Matt Tkachuk says, probably prefer to be elsewhere if Johnny's not here, and all the other things. Turns it into, obviously, Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, a first-round pick in 2025. We don't know where that's going to be. As well as Cole Schwint, the B prospect. So those are 4 blockbuster deals. There might be many GMs that go 5 to 10 years in the league that don't swing a single deal that big. Those are all significant first round plus core pieces. And, he's had some clubs that have been close, but he's also had some disappointing clubs that have missed the playoffs that we thought should have been better. And never really got the perfect mix here. The closest it got was 2 years ago, and that was ended by Connor McDavid in overtime in a Battle of Alberta round 2. And it feels like that's not very far for a decade. Twice into the second round, that's it.
How should Leafs fans feel about this hire? Because you know this guy very, very well. He was there for a decade, had some good times, had some bad times, but every GM's that way, no?
Yeah. No, I think if you look at long tenured GMs, they all make mistakes. They all have great moves. I mean, I think we all think Steve Yzerman's a great GM, but then you look at him adding Jacob Vrana and then giving him away for nothing. And sure, there's off ice stuff there, but I mean, that's there's always a mixed bag. He's an incredibly hard worker, and I think he's a guy that really doesn't leave many stones unturned. This isn't Ken Holland getting all his work done before his golf tournament and getting stuff off his desk. He's going to grind you for leverage when he's got it. He's not going to take your Duncan Keith offer in July. He's going to make you sweat till September, eat some of that money, as an example. So, I think, is he super progressive? No. Is he super old school? No. I think he likes to take in lots of different ideas, but at the same time, I do think he is a bit of a throwback in terms of the style of teams he likes. And to be fair, if Sam Bennett had panned out the way he wanted and Sean Monahan was still a 30-goal center, I mean, I think you've got the makings of a really, really good team that could make a deep run. They've also had the Bill Peters incident that kind of blew up in his face. I don't know what he was supposed to know about what happened 10 years prior in Rockford. They just worked the World Championships together. And in Calgary, he had to manage up a bunch. When you're paying a coach not to work, guess what your budget is for your next coach? Peanuts. So it was Glenn Gulletson and Jeff Ward, guys that clearly weren't the best candidates, but those were his marching orders. So I think extending his own guys in terms of, extending players that have been in the environment he did a good job with. He got burnt in free agency a bunch, but I mean, that's kind of the NHL. Like, unless it's Zdeno Chara, you're probably getting burnt in free agency, right?
Yeah, that's true. Hutz, you got one, bud?
It's definitely where it's definitely where it gets overpaid. You know, I look at the team he's built there, and you know, obviously losing last year in overtime. You know, like losing out to McDavid, and I look at Markstrom. I look at their goalies. Right, they have two solid goalies in Vladar and Markstrom. And Marky didn't have a great year this year, and obviously he was trying to catch a moving train. And I think for me, the issue in Toronto is in the pipes. You know, with his experience going and getting that goalie in free agency, I think that's going to be an important factor, you know, with Samsonov deal coming up and you got the young Woll. Like, I just want to see how he's managed the net, because it's going to be important for the Leafs. That's kind of where they've been lacking a little bit here when it comes to playoff time.
Yeah. And you know what? Treliving's best draft pick may indeed become Wolf, Dustin Wolf, this sensational goalie in the American Hockey League. So they've got goalie depth. And I think the challenge with goalies is that they're bleeping goalies. Like Sergei Bobrovsky's been hot crap for 5 years and now is throwing out Vezina Bob again, which we haven't seen since Columbus. And it's like, you may as well put him as a Conn Smythe finalist at this point. Who saw that coming? And then the flip side of the Stanley Cup final, you had Aiden Hill, you could have had for a fourth rounder earlier, who was fourth string on their depth chart, and he's been sensational. So, you know, the Jacob Markstrom thing, yeah, he was a Vezina runner-up last year, and he was dog shirt this year. So what are you going to get? And that's kind of, I agree with you on the thing with Toronto. Like, you could talk about the core four and not getting things done. What if you don't run into a 950 goalie in a series? Like, they beat Boston. They outplayed them 3 of the first 4 games. They just soiled themselves in a game 3 when it was really important and looked bad, but they outplayed them in game 1 and 2. They won game 4. They need to get a goalie hot at the right time of the year, and that's not something you just go shop for. Like, read the ingredients. Gets hot in May. Okay, we get them. Like, you need luck. Nobody saw Aiden Hill, Sergei Bobrovsky as the goalie showdown, and so we all have to go sit up and stare at the moon and think, okay, how do we get tougher, and what do we do for guys to succeed in the playoffs? It's just a hot goalie, guys. Like, that's all this is. And if Pittsburgh had beaten Chicago and Columbus in their last 2 games, one of those 2, Florida doesn't even get in. We could stop with this narrative about their winners and their clutch. Like, it's goalies, man. So I feel for Leafs fans. They've been out goalied a lot, and there's been a couple of those 7 consecutive series lost that they weren't great, but generally speaking, they haven't had a goalie get hot at the right time, whether it's Freddie Anderson or, you know, Matt Murray getting hurt this year, whatever it is. Like, Carter, you could speak to it. When you're in a zone, I don't care if you're the 60th best goalie or 5th best goalie in the world. The puck's not going in much.
No, yeah, it's tough, and especially the way teams are playing now, especially in playoff time, right? You get, even Bob, some of those games, it's just the timely ones, right? It's not how many you make, it's like when you make them, and it's tricky. It's tough to watch, but it's building, I think, that core of structure and coaching, and that's where I struggle with the run and gun style of play. When you get to the playoffs, it's hard to play that way if you don't have that extra depth to really defend and grind out those big wins, right? You look at Edmonton this year, the best offense in the league. You don't get goaltending, you don't have structure, it's not going to work.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to add too, and you know this, Pinder, is a defense, right? I think that seems to be the MO for Brad Treliving, is these big body, puck moving type guys. And that's the curious part for me, is like what he does to reconstruct that back end of the Maple Leafs, right?
I think so. Like, I think it's been sort of tough breaks in Toronto on that blue line. Like, Morgan Rielly, probably very good, but not what he once was. You know, clearly Jake Muzzin isn't the central piece that they thought they were bringing in at the time of that trade, or at least the extension, I believe, that he got after that. Giordano's long in the tooth and has played his way down the depth chart significantly there. But, you know, I thought Dubas went out and addressed it. They had, 9 guys that they rotated through 6 spots in the playoffs, essentially. Treliving knows Gustafsson. He added him at a deadline not too long ago for the Flames. Yarncroke is a guy he went and got. But, yeah, you're right. He does. Yeah. He likes to build through the back end. And, you know, when you think about adding Dougie Hamilton first in 2 seconds, Travis Hamonic first in 2 seconds, you know, the big swap with Hamilton out, at least he got Hanifin back. You know, they couldn't get Sven Berchi to pan out here. They swap him for a second. That's how they get Rasmus Anderson. Oliver Shillington, another pick that they acquired in trade that they picked up. He really loves a good blue line. And he's also, you know, done some good work. He bought low on Eric Goodbranson, and 1 year later, Columbus gave him 4 times 4 or something ludicrous. And I feel similarly on where, you know, the NHL was on Nikita Zadorov, who's now got 1 year left on a deal with Calgary that I think his value is a lot higher than it was. 14 goals last year. Just don't look too closely. It was a hat trick in a meaningless last game of the year. But he loves his big, tough D that can, your top four move the puck, and he likes a third pair that's going to, bump and intimidate and I guess physically impose themselves on the game.
I'm a big Luke Schenn guy. We're big Luke Schenn fans on the show. Of course, Jay Roseau's good buddies with him. So I think the possibility of him returning, I think, goes up with a guy like Brad Treliving coming in. I wonder how he feels as well walking in with Gio and Brody there as well. Like you mentioned, the comps and all the guys who Treliving knows very well from his days in Calgary. And hypothetically, Daryl Sutter walks into that Leafs room potentially. I doubt it. How do you think it would go with like Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, and all those guys? Imagine that.
Well, I'm more curious how it would go with Brad Treliving. Like this was a power struggle this year that it looked like Daryl had won. Like I think it was clearly laid out that the GM wanted the coach gone, that the coach was the biggest reason for a lot of the shortcomings of this roster this year. Maybe goaltending would be the other. And he couldn't get it done, and then he leaves, and then they do get rid of the coach. So you could talk about young stars and a demanding coach. I think the GM and that coach, we used to hear about Ryan Burke and Kevin Lowe and barn fights and stuff. Like let's see those two again. I think that was behind the scenes a lot of friction this year where Daryl's not a collaborator and the GM wanted to see some young kids play. It didn't happen a lot.
Lastly, what do you think this means for Sheldon Keefe? And if it's not Sheldon Keefe, like what type of coach, to the best of your ability, is Brad Treliving like?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's what kind of group do you have? Like if you're going to run with these four highly paid, skilled offensive players, it might be a different one than if you swap one of those pieces out for more depth or physicality or blue line help. And to be fair, like if you're a GM, just generally speaking, why would you use a bullet already? Like the one thing we saw him rip through here was coaches. He had 5 in 9 years. Hartley, Windsy Adams, gone. Glenn Gulletson, cheap as chips because they were paying Hartley on an extension to not be there. Then he gets the full salary back to hire a coach. It's Bill Peters. That lasted a year. And then we heard about Akeem Alou, Rockford, other allegations of not treating humans properly. He's gone. That budget's gone. Jeff Ward comes in. Finally, money's back. There's Daryl Sutter. So he's going to have more resources in Toronto than he did in Calgary, to be sure, in terms of that. But I wouldn't burn a coach at this point, just strategically. If you're thinking about how you'd map out things, you're only going to get so many coaches as a GM. This one's inherited. Not yet. And also, I don't know that Sheldon's a bad coach. I don't think he was the problem here. Were there some missteps? Sure. Did he trust some defenders more than had longer leash than you would have wanted as Leafs fans? Probably, but it's like Sheldon Keefe is not an NHL coach. My God, get rid of this guy and these guys are going to win the cup. That's not what they're looking at there, is it?
It's not, and I would just say it's a tough day for all the nerds in Toronto. Kyle Dubas no longer here. Brad Treliving is in, and who knows? Boston Pizza could be in as well. Pinder, thanks so much for this. Have a great show today, buddy.
Yeah,
Thanks,
appreciate it, guys. Boston Brutes for days. See ya.
See you, buddy. The one and only Ryan Pinder from Barnburner. Go check out their channel. Those dudes are fantastic together. I was on their show a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was only fitting to bring in somebody who has covered this guy for the last 9 years to get his sort of version of the story, how it went down, strengths, weaknesses, the 4-on-1, if you will.
No, I think it's important to a guy that's living it every day, right? He's on it. He's paying attention to what it's doing instead of just a Google search, right? Majority of people that are hitting Twitter, hitting up social media, just looking at Treliving from the outside. Tree. I'm just going to start calling him Tree, I think, because I am struggling spitting this one out. But he, it's nice he's been on it, seeing how he works, how he's handled coaches, how he's handled it. And I think that Hard Knocks that he talked about is he's not afraid to make some splashes, right? You look at those trades, especially the biggest talk we've had about that core four and what potentially happens. Do they move somebody? What happens? You're bringing in a guy with a resume of making those big splashes, making those moves. The trades he just rifled off there are huge deals. Mm-hmm. So he's not afraid of it. And I'm sure when he sat down and had his meeting, he had something in the hopper that he thought about, was careful, seeing where it goes. And, obviously time's going to tell, but, it's setting up like something potentially goes down.
And it seemed like a match made in heaven. Of course, his name came to the forefront at the very beginning of this whole search, does his interview, and obviously he did really, really well because they're about to name him the new GM, the 18th GM in franchise history. The Betano wrap-up is presented by Betano.ca. The game starts now, 19 plus. Please play responsibly. We got the Jays run line last night after they were down 2-0 in that game. We're going to go back to the well of this Blue Jays team today. Alek Manoah's on the hill tonight for game 2 of this 3-game set with the Milwaukee Brewers. Massive game for Manoah. He's been really, really struggling. So I'm going to look at the under 9.5 runs in this game. Julio Teheran's going for Milwaukee. He's sort of a gas can go off at any waking moment. Maybe they score a billion runs in them. Maybe they don't. Really, really depends on that guy. But I'm going to take a shot at the under tonight. Manoah against Teheran, and I think the Jays need to win this game. If you're picking a side, I think the Blue Jays win again. They need to go on a run. But I'm feeling good after last night's victory, Huts.
Yeah, well, it's 2 in a row, right? Vegas and then the Jays. And you got to think that, they're going to come out and with Manoah, they're going to try to play a tight game. Hopefully he can shut them down and keep this going here because we got to stay in the hunt here. We need some fall ball. I can get down there for a playoff game now. My schedule's pretty open.
Yeah, it is. That's good to hear. And I think we're all looking for that signature Manoah moment or that appearance this year. He's been really, really struggling. Can't find the strike zone, which command has been really, really big for that guy. So we'll see if he can bring it to the table tonight and hit the under between Milwaukee and Toronto at 9.5. Looking at the chat, complete fuego, 338 concurrent viewers right now, which is fantastic. And maybe they're all here for Ryan Pinder. Who knows? But John Greystone writes in, Marner is going to Carolina. It's sort of hilarious, dude, and I know you know about social media and Twitter, and you were big on Twitter back in the day. I put this out during the conference final. I said, what would make perfect sense for Carolina is Mitch Marner and, vice versa. And then next thing you know, like 3 days ago, I see this massive article how people are trying to brew up a storm between Carolina and Toronto. It's like, no, this is the new age media where some Yahoo in Liberty Village in Toronto created this whole thing. But I do think it's a good fit. If you look at what Carolina has, what Toronto has, especially now with Brad Treliving coming in, I think the only way you trade one of these big boys is if you get some D help.
Yeah, I agree. It's got to be on the back end. It's something that is, you got to keep your guys up front. It's hard to score goals, but when you get to that playoff time, you have to keep them out of your net, and you got to stay in it. And I think that was a big hole this year. And, Carolina's got a lot of D to go around, and, a guy like Marner would fit in very well down there. And, someone that's stable in the back end would really push this team over the top, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I think if there's somebody who can get the best, maybe at a Mitch Marner, it's Rod Brind'Amour, and obviously you'd have a better account of that playing in the NHL, knowing some players I'm sure who played and have played for Rod Brind'Amour. I just think he's a different animal, and I think he gets the best out of his players, taking nothing away from Sheldon Keefe. But I do think a change of scenery for Mitch Marner could be just what the doctor ordered. I just think a bit of a different splash to this Leafs team, I think, can go a long way. But again, people like to draw correlations to like Tampa and other teams just staying the course, and then you finally break through. So that's going to be the big conversation, I think, as you move forward to the draft and the offseason is like this whole, conversation in Leafs land. Do we blow it up? Do we not? Like Brad Treliving is going to be asked a lot of big time questions, I would say, over the next couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah. He's going to have a lot on his plate. And, obviously, like we said, time's going to tell, right? Because we can make up and talk about teams and do whatever, which is part of our gig, trying to find where it would fit and what would happen. But he's got this on his plate now, and it's going to be, project number one here is figuring out what to do with this Leafs core and where do they go from here because they need to get further than the second round. That's for sure.
Yeah. And again, people are drawing concerns to like Brad Treliving, how he didn't do much in terms of winning success in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Again, you can go around in circles in this conversation. At the end of the day, who was truly out there? Like maybe this is the wrong year to look for a new GM or a new head coach. The fact that there was no clear-cut person that came to our minds right away when this position became open, I think tells you all you need to know. So I think along the lines of what Ryan Pinder said, and I said off the top of the show as well, like Treliving is good for this market because he's not Kyle Dubas, he's not in that extreme, and he's also not like, the other side of the spectrum. He's somewhere in between, a guy who's got experience, can handle this media. Like there's a lot to handle in a market like Toronto, and I think he's a good guy for this job. Like I don't want to call him the John Tavares of GMs, but like JT is a good captain because nothing fucking faces the guy. And I think Brad Treliving along those lines can fill that sort of need when it comes to being the person in front of the camera all the time, being the GM of this team. And also to that point, like, in general, I think people put too much stock in a GM. Like, I think the team around him is almost more important than the actual GM. You talked about Pridham. You talked about Haley Wickenheiser. I know Spets is not in the mix anymore. But the team around Brad Treliving, I think, will only help him where, obviously, all humans have strengths. They have weaknesses. So Treliving can focus on his strengths, and then some of the people around him can focus on the weaknesses. They can come together and form the magic elixir, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And we talked about that, like the unlimited resources they have off the ice, right? When you're not dealing with
Exactly.
the cap. And so he can focus and have that, especially now Pinder talked about that, the budget he's going to have as well, which is going to open up doors that he may have never had before, where he was struggling to manage those different things. And, it's definitely one of those things. I've played with teams where we've had GMs that are like more hands-on, more dealing with stuff. And it's a different relationship. They were trying to be your friend. Then I've had GMs where they don't even talk to you. They have nothing to do with anybody. They let the team just be the team. They put the pieces in place and let the coach do it. So there's definitely that different dynamic. And maybe having a GM that's going to be more just business, he's doing his job, you guys take care of playing on the ice, is going to help these guys, where before they had that relationship with Dubas, they maybe felt that pressure that we need to succeed for Kyle because he's our friend, he's our buddy, where now it's more of a business and get the job done or we're going to make moves, and it's going to happen.
I like it. David Bova writes in, let me just find it here quickly. Nick, it's not even about playoff success. He DNQ 4 out of 9 seasons, didn't make the playoffs, no track record of success, 0. Fair enough. Probably somebody who is a Flames fan. I get it. And I appreciate all sort of different sides of the conversation as well. A lot of people comparing, like a guy like Gretzky playing with a soft player, and it's who you surround him with, like getting to my point. I think that's an excellent point and well taken. And, I just think in general, I think we put too much stock in general managers these days. So I'm really intrigued to see when this fucking press conference goes down. I know it's going to happen on Friday anyways. Like, it's not confirmed just yet, but again, all signs point to Brad Treliving being named the next GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Huts, phenomenal job the last 3 days. I'm happy it ended on this high note, considering how it went last time around when we got together. I tried to put out content, and like an hour after we got off the air, the Leafs announced that they have fired Kyle Dubas. You got your foot into things a bit here today because Brad Treliving news comes out. So appreciate your time, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Obviously, I enjoyed it, and gave us something to talk about and work it into Leafland here. And I hope Montreal's a good time, my man.
Thank you. I'm going to have an excellent time at an Italian wedding. My cousin Jeremy's getting married this weekend, so it should be a sick time. Open bar. Fucking love that shit. So, yeah, we'll see what happens over the next couple days. Rosie's going to be back in the mix tomorrow, undoubtedly some comments and concerns and just some hot takes in general. Many thanks to everybody in the chat. You guys are fantastic. Again, if you're just watching for the first time, please subscribe at the Leafs Nation 401. At the Leafs Nation 401, available wherever you find your podcasts as well. And many thanks going to Ryan Pinder of Barnburner for hopping on, giving us the 411 on Brad Treliving, and also to producer Aaron. You did a great job today, buddy. Just keep killing it. So for Carter Hutton, I'm Nick Alberga. Yes, slow clap. What do they do with that clap now is a big thing now, but that's Carter Hutton. I'm Nick Alberga. Thank you to everybody in the chat, and we'll talk on Thursday. Take care.